Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Delaware Student Success webinar on apprenticeships. My name is Karen Keegan. I'm from the Delaware Department of Education. And on the webinar with me are my colleagues from the Institute for Public Administration at the University of Delaware who partner with us on Delaware Student Success initiatives. Chris Kelly and Tilly Jonas are on with me. They'll be helping to run this webinar. I want to go over just a couple of things before we start. So no attendees are on video tonight, and you also are all muted. So please write your questions in the chat. That would be great. And our presenters will answer your questions at the end. So please, as you're thinking of questions, put them in the chat and we'll address them probably at the end of the presentation. Chris, can you go to the next slide? So we've had I think 15 webinars already. I just want to call your attention to these because even though we've already had a lot of them, you can see where we're near the bottom with apprenticeships tonight. All of them have been recorded, so they're all posted on our DelawareStudentSuccess.org website. So topics from how to pick a career if you're not sure what you might want to go into. Several topics on college admissions, just a basic college admissions webinar, like what's involved, what are admissions people looking for, financial aid and scholarships. And then every college and university in the state of Delaware did their own webinar. So those are all recorded as well if you want to learn about a certain college. We also, in the last 2 weeks, we had military presentations. So on November 5th, we had the Army, Navy, Marines and Air Force. And then we had another presentation with the Army National Guard, and we will be adding one with the Air National Guard as well in the next week or so. So those are all great sources of information for you to help figure out what you might want to do after you graduate from high school. We also had a really good session last week on resumes, interviews, and cover letters. So that's good information no matter what you're planning to do. And then just so you know, on Thursday, we're going to be talking about industry certifications and what kind of jobs you can get with an industry certification. One other thing I want to tell you about is we have a texting program. The people on this call are the people who are running the texting program, my colleagues at the Institute for Public Administration and me. It's for high school students, and parents are welcome to join as well. You can text the word success to 302-492-2092. And we will send you tips and things you might want to think about doing on your next steps to planning for after high school graduation. You can also text us back with questions and we will answer them for you or direct you to someone who can answer your questions. So please feel free to sign up for texting. When you do text the word success to that number, we will ask you for your first name, your last name, your grade, and your school. And that just helps us get you the right information for whatever grade you might be in, so it's appropriate. So with that, I'm really excited to turn this over to our presenters tonight to talk about apprenticeships and what is involved, what career opportunities there are, what's the education involved. We have Joe Olivere from the Department of Labor, and we have Mike Hague from Sussex Tech Adult Education, and they're going to share a lot of good information with you. So we're going to switch over to their presentation right now. So thank you both for being here tonight with us.
Joe, there you go, Joe.
Oh, hey.
That will be
first time. So thanks for having us. I was just thanking Karen. I appreciate it. I'm sure I won't speak for Mike, but I'm sure for both of us here, it's a pleasure to be here and help you guys out with understanding how registered apprenticeship works. I'll get right into the presentation if there's no other things to address. Basically, my name is Joe Olivere. I work for the Department of Labor in the Office of Registered Apprenticeship. We work as part of the Division of Employment and Training. So you will see and hear from us anytime if you get into an apprenticeship that involves your kind of progression through the program. Mostly we deal with the sponsors or the registered companies that sponsor these apprentices. but by no means does that define the entirety of our communication. We do a lot with the apprentices, especially when they're getting started and getting the information. So let me get into the slideshow. What is registered apprenticeship? It's a little different than just a standard apprenticeship in that, the state is overseeing this process, making sure that the credentials of the parties involved are good. An earn while you learn model has been the terminology that's used the most. This is basically a schooling or an education process that you are fully employed and paid for through the on-the-job training that you get. As far as tuition is free to state residents or companies that are residing in Delaware. Once you are registered and you go into the program, the tuition is waived by the institutions that we have a partnership with. Registration fee is not, but it is nominal. And you will be able to kind of go into your profession here with very little payment out of pocket, which we'll get into one of the greater benefits of it. Another thing that you have is you have a paid job. So think of it this way. You're just doing additional classroom or virtual education pieces that are going to be as part of going to work every day, Monday through Friday, working on, we'll use electricians as a trade, working on your electrical trade, and doing whatever your normal process there is, whether over the course of the first couple of weeks you're being taught basics and all those types of things, or whether you have experience. But when you get into it, that job, that training that you're getting on there is paid. You are an employee of that company and you are making income while you do it. A person is recognized as a registered apprentice when they enter into a formal agreement with their employer, who is at that point a sponsor with the Delaware Department of Labor. Formal agreement, you're basically saying that I want to learn how to do this, and the employer is saying I want to teach you, and you're both saying that you're going to adhere to the standards of apprenticeship that company has agreed to with us. The registered apprentice receives a combination of both classroom and related technical instruction and on-the-job training. The classroom or related technical instruction, saying and/or, because this year it's not classroom with some of the things that are going on, but you would normally attend 3 to 6 hours a week. I think almost every trade is a 2-night-a-week, 3-hour-a-night class that you would go to either Monday, Wednesday, or Tuesday, Thursday. Those hours are part of that related training. You are still doing on-the-job training every day when you go to work, Monday through Friday. Again, I use that as just kind of a way of knowing it's a 40-hour work week. And you would, log hours, so to speak, that are in that on-the-job training that are part of the program. On-the-job training is completed by a skilled employee who serves as a mentor. In some companies, an owner of a company has an apprentice, and they might be the only 2 or 3 employees of the company, maybe him, another maybe journeyman or journey person that's in the trade, and then the apprentice. And sometimes it's a large company. Sometimes it's a company that might have 30 or 40 skilled workers, but choose to have 10, 20, 30 apprentices working to grow the business and to continue to replace those journey persons as they age out. Typically, an apprentice works during the day and attends school at night. I don't know too many situations where that is not the way it works, but we do have some expanded trades with things that are newer into the apprenticeship model that might not always be the case. The only one I can really think of would be culinary, because restaurants and cooks are going to work at night as well. So that'd be a little different model than the traditional model, but that's the general idea behind it: is work during the day, go to school at night, 2 nights a week. 5 core components. Employer involvement is integral. Well, let me put it this way. The employer or the sponsor is what drives registered apprenticeship. With no sponsor or no employer that says, I'm going to teach you or train you, you are not going to get the on-the-job training required, which is a much bigger investment than the technical instruction. So the base of the program is that employer who is giving you the Monday through Friday, 40-hour-a-week training. Structured on-the-job training with mentoring. Again, this is not being taught out of a book while you're at work or being taught out of a training session. That's what you go to the night school for, to get that formal theory. But the daytime work is on-the-job training. If you're a construction carpenter, you're going to be putting hands on wood and getting a hammer and nails and doing work, measuring, cutting, the things that you would do in that trade. On-the-job training is going to be that active training. The related training and instruction, 144 to, what is it, 157, Mike? 157, that's the range. It's 144 hours minimum, up to 157 hours a year in
That's right.
related training and instruction. You will get, with that 2 night a week, 3 hour a night commitment, whether it's virtual or in classroom. And that is primarily going to be the theory education that you would have throughout the course of the apprenticeship, whether it be a 1, 2, or 4 year apprenticeship. There are the rare 3-year apprenticeships, but generally speaking, it's usually a 2 or 4. Rewards for skill gains. The only way I can really put this in the terminology that it really works for everybody is payment, income. When you're working in a registered apprentice, as you increase in skills and go through the program, you will be paid a progressive set of wages. So that means that you may start out at 50% of what a fully educated journey person makes. But after 2 years, you might be making 75%. And after the 3rd year, you might be making 80 or 85%. And by the time you've done the apprenticeship, the goal is to have you in the 90th to 100th percentile of income for that profession. National Occupational Credential. Well, the best part about registered apprenticeship is the paper you get at the end. And you get 2 of them, so I'm not going to sell short the schools. You get a certificate from the school that you've graduated from the adult trade school. And then you also get a certificate from the Delaware Department of Labor that's signed by our Secretary of Labor. And that is saying you are 100% recognized as a journey person in your trade. That is nationally recognized by the U.S. Department of Labor, and by any contractor worth their salt knows what it is. You are going to have that credential for the rest of your life. In some trades, it means bypassing some testing and some licensing, and in some trades, it just means proof that you are, without a doubt, someone who is educated properly at the right way in your trade. It's really big if you think about it. When you go to college for 4 years and you get a degree, and that degree says, hey, I have a bachelor's degree in finance. That's great. It says that you have completed this. When you get journey papers, it says that I am a journey person electrician. I have completed 8,000 hours of electrical trade work. I have completed 144 hours a year of higher education. And this is now where I am stepping into the role of a full-time journey person in that trade, and should be paid commensurate with that experience. Delaware Registered Apprenticeship. This slide kind of just some info. Each program has scheduled wage increases. This is kind of a lot of what I just said, so I apologize. Apprentices receive journey person papers at the end. We do call it the other 4-year degree quite commonly. As a registered apprentice, the tuition to the selected VOTEC school is waived. The registration fee is paid by the responsible party, whether it be the apprentice, or sometimes the sponsors will say, hey, you're going to school, I'll pay that for you. That is not something the state gets involved in. That's between you. And the ratio requirements for each occupation are in effect to help protect you from being overworked. You don't want 7 apprentices with 1 journey person and not getting that attention and education that they need. 1 mentor to 1 apprentice for some of the more less traditional trades. When you get into trades that are heavier and more traditional, been around a while, industry standards are much different. We do allow for work site ratios. So when you ever hear something like, oh, 3 journey persons to 1 apprentice, meaning that there has to be 3 fully educated journey persons to every 1 apprentice, keep in mind, that is not something that we enforce for the entirety. If you have 3 apprentices and you have them on 3 different work sites, we do allow a 1-to-1 ratio on a work site as long as there's not multiple apprentices. So 1 apprentice on a work site working on a job with a journey person plumber is able to work there, while another journey person plumber for that company can be on another site with one apprentice, and that is okay, even though that's a 3-to-1 ratio for that trade. If it comes up in discussion later with things, just remember that the ratio requirements are not necessarily designed to do anything other than to make sure that you're not being overworked and undereducated. In Delaware, there are 1,400 registered apprentices. I want to say that number fluctuates. Right now, I think we're actually more in like the 1,375 range. But for me, myself, as an ATR, I have over 400 apprentices and over 130 companies that I just, help work with and represent when dealing with, anything related to their standards or getting apprentices registered. So, there's 3 different ATRs. We do split it amongst the 3 of us, and you can kind of get an idea of how much apprenticeship has grown. If I tell you that 5 or 6 years ago, there's probably 40% less apprentices in the state. So over five years, maybe I'd say, or roughly shorter than that, there's been anywhere from about 40 to 45% growth. And a lot of that has to do with the return of the relevance of trade work as a component to career path and secondary education. Those 20 occupations with programs are over, but that's changing. We've dabbled in a couple of different expansion trades. This year, we've launched some IT programs. There's a lot of IT apprenticeships. Culinary is going to launch statewide probably next year. We have auto technician that has launched 2-3 years ago, which has had ups and downs, because basically you have to look at some of these newer trades as being less traditional and more based on needs of the business. And then also you have your traditional trades that we've had. I think top 5 or top 3 I don't think has ever really changed: electrician, plumber, and HVAC. They are always the driving forces. Sheet metal workers, construction laborers, iron workers, welders. We see a lot of welding, construction, carpentry, millwrights, or facilities maintenance mechanics. There are a lot of other trades outside of these, and you're going to see some on the next slide when it shows you all the different ones that the schools offer. But it's a fluctuating list and changing based on needs. Here's a list of a good chunk of those occupations that we see most commonly. You'll see Newcastle County, Kent County, and Sussex County listed. Newcastle County Votech, Polytech, and Sussex Tech, respectively, offer these courses in partnership with the Department of Labor and the Department of Ed to supply tuition-free education for candidates that are sponsored. They're pretty well spread out amongst the trades that you would think, but you see some of the other ones here. Marine mechanic, that's a nice new one that's offered just in Sussex Tech. That is a newer one, again, expansion trades. And you see auto mechanic at the top. They have a diesel and a gas engine auto mechanic class. But we've covered everything from those to, like I said, machinists, pipe fitting, sprinkler fitters, a lot of trades that have been around longer. The benefits of apprenticeship. There's the benefits that I want to tout over anything. And it's part here, and you'll see it checked off as I go through, but it's going to be heavy on that tuition-free education. There's something great about being able to be educated in a career that will pay you probably on average more than the average 4-year degree college earner makes. And I say on average because there's certainly not a cap on what you can make. But with that being said, to give you that education for less than $1,000 is an amazing, to me, an amazing benefit of being part of a registered apprenticeship. The benefits that we see are that it builds valuable skills in the trade. Obviously, education is given you on the job and as well as in theory. Gain higher wages as an apprentice. You will certainly go through a progressive wage scale, but as a nationally recognized journey person, you're definitely going to command the pay that works for that position in that title. It's not well, I've done this for 10 years and I should be earning this. You do have some credentials to back up what you're saying. which leads me to the next point, to receive the national credentials. Again, those journey papers, certificate of completion of a registered apprenticeship is a valuable thing given by all the 50 states and backed by the U.S. Department of Labor. You can advance your career in growing fields. Registered apprenticeship is always expanding and looking at different paths. So don't automatically assume that I don't want to be an electrician or a plumber, so apprenticeship's not for me. That's always something that you should look at, and it's a benefit to the way that the programs are worked. Tuition-free education, again, zero debt, coming out of 4 years, educated, paying anywhere from maybe $150 to $300 in registration. And I say really anywhere from $150 to $250 in registration. It's not a high cost, and that cost is the only cost you'll pay for the 4 years or 2 years, depending on what it is. It's quite an accomplishment to get through that and not have debt. You receive your journey papers upon completion. Those are issued by us. They're usually sent out anywhere from 2 weeks to a month after your completion. And again, they're sealed and signed by the Secretary of Labor from the Department of Labor. There's a point here that says 300,000 more is earned on average by apprentices during their careers than workers who did not apprentice. But I think what's more valuable to say is that, especially in some of the apprenticeable trades that have traditionally high wage scales, you probably will make a fair share of money in the years after your apprenticeship, but even during your apprenticeship, to be able to make a solid progressive wage while other people that are in college full-time aren't making probably near that because they're either working part-time or doing whatever. It can't be undersold. It's a pretty cool model for moving forward through the secondary education and moving into a career path. As an apprentice, you work Monday through Friday. You attend classes Mondays and Wednesdays, 6 to 9. That's also sometimes Tuesdays and Thursdays. But basically, this model is what I was speaking about, just to sell home that, there is that two-tier: work during the day, go to school at night, at least a couple of nights a week design. And that's how you're able to integrate the on-the-job in the classroom. The process of apprenticeship, and I'm going to get into after this the steps to become an apprentice and really where to start. But this is the actual process that takes place when a company wants to register an apprentice. An employer will fill out an application with the Department of Labor to become an apprentice. That employer may say, I want to have apprentices in one trade or two trades. It's not necessarily, this guy is going to apprentice, this trade and that's it. And then this gal is going to do this. What it is I own a Joe's Electric and I want to have an electrical apprentice, but I also would like to have an electrical systems tech apprentice that's going to be doing my my front end after things are wired to do things like security systems and other stuff. So whatever that is that company is doing, they can sponsor multiple apprentices and occupations. But once they're registered with us, that's when they would be able to pull you in. We review the application and create something called the Standards of Apprenticeship. This is the regulations, guidelines. It says how they're going to be treating their apprentices through education, and it does cover some of the technical instruction topics. But since the schools are the ones that are doing that, and we have that relationship, it's not on the employer to make sure that's being completed. We're able to directly communicate with the schools to make sure that's there. At that point, the employer is a sponsor once they sign their standards, and they can register an apprentice. They have something called the Apprenticeship Agreement. This is a document that's filled out by the apprentice, by the company, and by the Department of Labor, and it says all parties involved recognize this apprentice and enter into an agreement for their apprenticeship. It has changed over the years. It's not so much a document as it is a web form that now is filled out. So an employer would just go in, type in all their information. We definitely understand that an employer says, I'm going to register John Doe as an apprentice. If John Doe doesn't fill out the form himself and sign it, I don't think he's or she's going to be upset that they got free education out of it. So as long as the employer signs that document electronically, we sign it electronically, and then a copy is given to the apprentice, that is all that's needed. That agreement is also very important to people like Mike, because it says that they are a registered apprentice and that they are going to be getting that tuition waiver. So it is something that is a big thing for an apprentice to get that agreement and have it to be able to prove that they're registered. The apprentice or sponsors provide that to the VOTEC to get the registered tuition waived courses. The apprentice or sponsor pays that registration fee to the school. However that's worked out, again, that's not through us. And then the apprentice works their 40-hour or whatever hour a week job and attends courses, again, most commonly at night, and is working towards it until they complete the program. So you're interested in becoming an apprentice. Now what? Well, this is the part that's really tough for a lot of people. An apprenticeship, a registered apprenticeship doesn't start until a sponsor employs you and has you come on board as an apprentice, meaning you cannot become a registered apprentice by yourself. You need a sponsor. But there are lots of steps to get in to a registered apprenticeship that we can help you with. And there are some new programs and projects in place to help for entry-level apprentices to get into the education before necessarily they get into the sponsorship. First thing, determine what you want to do. Have an idea, even if you're not 100% sure. Coming out of high school or coming out of any kind of higher education, I should say secondary education, you might think that this is what I want to do, and it might change. But if you have an idea of a roundabout, you can look at what occupations pay. You can look at what the apprenticeship opportunities may be based on how many registered sponsors there are in the state. But at the end of the day, have a little bit of background information on what you want to do, and that'll help you a lot. Finding employment, I really preach, and I can't say it enough, you're not looking for a job. You're looking for an apprenticeship. You're looking for an opportunity or an apprenticeship opportunity. You're looking for a career. So when you are looking for that employment, you need to go through many different ways. If there's unions involved, apply to the unions for apprenticeships. If there's not unions involved, if it's a non-organized field, then make sure that you're looking at different sponsors that maybe already sponsor people in the state, as well as looking at companies that may not sponsor anybody now currently, but maybe looking. I had a plumber, this past year, 2019, that came in and said, you know what, nobody in my family wants to take over the business. I'm about 50 some odd years old. I'm only gonna be doing this another 5 or 10 years. So I want to get an apprentice. He brought in a young kid that he vetted through the hiring process. And, here's a guy that's going into apprenticeship for plumbing with a small business that 6 months before that, they did not know each other. It was not, hey, how are you? You want to become a plumber? Great. Come back and tell me in a little while. This is a guy who was looking for an opportunity and an employer that was looking for a candidate, and it worked out. So always don't sell yourself short on searching for the opportunity. Use the Department of Labor for that. Create a job seeker account with Delaware Job Link. We not only help you get that resume out to companies, but also help a lot of companies find resumes from our pool. So that's key. We don't do job pairing in the Office of Apprenticeship. I will never say, oh, you want to be this apprentice? Here's a company that's hiring. Why don't you guys go together? We don't do that. We don't get involved in that. Employers hire who they want and vet their apprentices how they want. However, we do help try to supply them with, maybe a list of candidates if they want to go on JobLink and pull resumes. Lastly, take classes. This means that you may walk into Mike's institution and say, I really want to get into electrical work. I can't find a sponsor, but can I become what they call a trade extension student? Can I become a student at your school? And you will pay the tuition, but you will find that in that year, great guys like Mike are going to help you expose yourself to opportunities you didn't know. Maybe there are people hiring that Mike's got an ear on, or maybe there are other kids in that class. I say kids, but some of these are grown adults. But the people in that class may work for a sponsor who's looking to grow, and may be able to pass your name along and say, hey, there's this other great student in my class that's doing well and really nice guy, good worker. I think you should bring him on over here. We would hope that if you're unemployed, that would be an opportunity for you. The last caveat here is that there is a program in place that will next year in the summer go into effect. They did do some test run of it this year. We will be providing some tuition waivers for non-employed apprentice students. It's a trade extension student, not a registered apprentice. You will not be a registered apprentice, but as a trade extension student, you can get a head start on the school, and we will provide you a 1-year tuition waiver. And that is something that we have gotten funding for. There is more details about that. And if you would like to get more information about that, you can contact us. At the end, we'll have contact info. That next year when that's available, there will be a limited amount of tuition waivers for non-employed people that do want to get school started and kind of take that initiative and be lucky enough not have to pay for it. If you qualify, we have a team of people that work out of the Hudson Center that would be able to put you through the process and get you the voucher. So contacting us. This is the main line to the Office of Apprenticeship. This is the main address to the Office of Apprenticeship. Myself and my 2 coworkers, as well as our supervisor, all have access to this. And we do go through and vet it in a process that will allow you to get one of us to get back to you with answers to questions. If you have already maybe moved along the process of finding someone that wants to hire you, and that employer needs to get information on how to become a sponsor, same place. Apprenticeship@delaware.gov, 302-761-8328. That is, again, the line that will get you into the call circle between myself and my 2 peers. And in any key, in any situation, in any case, if you have questions about it, if you call the Department of Labor's main line, sometimes you'll get bounced around a little bit based on the fact that right now so much phone traffic comes in and not foot traffic. However, they should be able to get you to us if you ask for the Office of Apprenticeship. I'm going to turn it over to Mike. He's got some information for you about that RTI portion, the school portion. He'll recap some of that and go over it and get you information on that. But I appreciate you listening to me and let me explain to you a little bit about the program.
Thanks, Joe. I mean, I appreciate it. It's really good. So I heard a couple of really cool things there, like Delaware has a hybrid model. So they're encompassing the education 2 ways. There's a mentor that, teaches you all that on-the-job training skill, that hands-on, which is super valuable. And then you've got, what I manage, which is the training instruction, which is in the classroom. So that dual education really reinforces what you're learning. So my name is Mike Hague, and I'm with Sussex Tech in Georgetown. I'm with the Adult Education Division. Joe, can you get the next slide, please? I am responsible for the related technical and training instruction that is the part of the registered apprenticeship training. So as Joe said, the apprentices receive a combination of both classroom instruction and on-the-job training. The related training instruction is like the foundational theory that's associated with each trade. So it's the math, it's the science, it's the terminology, it's all that theory that goes into what each trade is. There could be some algebraic formulas in there, like in electrical. There's a lot of math, plumbing. It's really interesting how that theory is reinforced during the day when you're working on the job. And the students learn that theory at night, and then they apply that hands-on training during the day. So that twofold instruction is really what sets us apart from other, I guess, educational models. Is that the old analogy I always use is you can always read a book on how to swim, but you don't know how to swim until you actually get in the water. So that's kind of what we do here. And like I said, I'm with Sussex Tech, and there's other institutions. So in the Sussex County, Sussex Votech, the adult division, handles all the apprenticeship training that happens in that county. And then Joe, can you go to the next slide, please? And then the other schools are Newcastle County, Votechs, and then Polytechs. So each county has a prospective vocational school or educational institution that delivers apprenticeship training. You do not have to actually live in Sussex County to receive instruction. So I've got guys that live in Maryland that work in Delaware, and they come to my school. I've got guys that live in Sussex County, but maybe we don't offer a program. that say Newcastle County does, and they'll go to Newcastle County's program. So just as long as you live in the state of Delaware or you work in the state of Delaware, and Joe, correct me if I'm wrong, if you live in Maryland and your employer is in Delaware, you can still take apprenticeship training in Delaware. So you have to be tied into Delaware one of two ways: live here, work here. And the other part about the related training instruction is actually the instructors. The instructors are industry experts. So these guys work. Most of them work during the day in the trade. These guys have been in the trade, 10, 12, 15, 20 years. Some of my instructors are retired. Those guys are, just giving back to their industry. They spent 30, 35, 40 years working as electricians, and they come in and they teach at night. And I got to tell you, they're a wealth of knowledge and they're great instructors. They really know the ins and outs of their business. They know a lot of people in the business. So like Joe said, you come in first year student, you don't necessarily have a job, you're not registered, but you want to start your education. Between the students that are in the class with you, like and the instructor, we're going to find you a job, and we'll write reference letters for you. We'll help you create a resume and a job seeker account. And we'll use all the avenues we can to get you that sponsorship so that you can come to school for free. It's really cool, when you're in class with guys that are working during the day, this kind of organic thing happens where, you guys talk about your day, what happened. And, you might be sitting next to a guy that says, hey man, we're looking for work. I heard, you're working at a car dealership and you want to become an electrician. We're looking for a guy. Are you interested? And that's the kind of things that happen. Most of my guys are working in the trade by year 2. And definitely, I'd say 99% of my guys by year 3 are in the trade. And typically, the 4-year apprenticeships, it's 576 hours of classroom instruction. That usually gets done first. And then there's that 8,000 hours on the job training, which is about, 2,000 hours a year. And that might take, extra 6 months to a year to obtain. But typically, like Joe said, get in there, get into class first, and then let us work for you and find you that job, that sponsorship, and get you where you got to go. And so what our instructors teach is they teach, 10, 20, 30 years of experience, which, you can't get from a book, but we also do have books. So the related training instruction, we do have books. So, electrical is 4 years. So we'll have electrical year 1, 2, 3, and 4 book. We'll have plumbing, 1, 2, 3, 4. And that book comes from NCCER, and NCCER is a nationally recognized curriculum that, apprenticeship uses across the country, and it's accredited, and it's a really good curriculum. And in that, the curriculum itself is actually developed by industry experts too. They look for people, they look for input from industry, they look for, it's really good stuff. So, you're getting the best of both worlds. And like Joe said, it's almost 100% debt free. Most of OTECs do have a registration fee. I think, between Newcastle County, Kent County, and Sussex County, we're all around $150 for the registration fee. So, if you're sponsored, a lot of times your employer pays for that. So you can get what we call the other 4-year degree debt free, or, for at the most, if you have to pay out of pocket, our programs run about $500 a year. So for 4 years, you might have $2,000 tied in to a degree that is, you can use all over the country. You're going to be making good money, and you're always going to have a job. This kind of COVID climate that we're in right now, all my electricians are working, all my plumbers are working. These guys are making money. They're essential workers. So, there's always going to be work for you. It's a great career path. Joe, can you go to the next slide, please? So this is some of our contact information. So I'm Mike Hague. I'm from Sussex Tech once again. And, I manage the apprenticeship programs in Sussex County. And Jeremy McIntyre, he's does what I do. He manages the apprenticeship training for Polytech in Kent County. And then you have Mark Wilson. Mark Wilson has the most out of all of us. Newcastle County is a highly populated area. It's very condensed. It's a small county. He's got, I think, 4 or 5 schools, a skills center that they do training in. And Mark Wilson, he handles all the apprenticeship training in Newcastle County. So like I said before, you don't have to actually live in that specific county to go to that school. You can go to any, as long as you're a Delaware resident or you work in Delaware, you can attend school anywhere. I know if you live down in like Delmar area on the Maryland Delaware line, driving in Newcastle County is probably, not going to work because, you're going to work all day, 8, 10 hours a day, and then you're going to come to school, 2 nights a week usually it's from 6 to 9 p.m. Like Joe said, Mondays, Wednesdays, Tuesday, Thursdays. But I got to tell you, it's not all year. You don't go the full year. We typically start in September, and you get a Christmas break, you get Thanksgiving break, and then you also get a summer break. And we're usually done by Easter break or somewhere around there. So you'll go to school from September to April, and most trades get really busy, through the summer, and that's when you won't have school. So you better pull those long days, make that overtime, and really kind of maybe rest up on the education side, the related training side, and then do a little bit more hands-on and apply that theory during the day. So we did this year move a lot of our programs from face-to-face instruction to virtual instruction. So we have 2 platforms that we use. We use Zoom, just like this platform here, for the kind of face-to-face instruction. And then we use Schoology, which is a learning management system. And that's where we send all of our assignments. And you do get a book. So, everything now has been moved online. We're still working on moving other programs online. So if you did want to attend a program in Newcastle County, you lived in Sussex County, you can get with Mark and maybe he can set you up with, a virtual learning. I do know we do like to do hands-on labs, especially for our year 1 guys, especially for the guys that aren't working in the trade. So what we'll do is we'll set up maybe a plumbing lab where, I'll buy a bunch of pipe and a bunch of, glue and primer, and then, we'll have to, pipe in some kind of system. And so we have labs that we like our guys to get hands-on, to kind of reinforce that classroom theory. And we'll do that here and there. So if you do a virtual class out of county or, further away, you may be required to drive to, participate in the labs. This is regulated by the Department of Labor. You have to have the 144 hours per year. So we're pretty tough on attendance. You really can't miss any time. You have to have that 144 hours at the end of the year. There's a little bit of a leeway there for some absences. I will excuse some absences. I'll let you, not, excuse it like you don't have to come to class. I'll let you make it up on an off night or something, for hardships or something like that. But really, we need you there. So just make sure you're asking those questions at registration and you fully understand the policies and the procedures that our schools, the VOTEX and the DOL sets forth. It's pretty rigorous, and, we need you there every night. We need you learning, and it's really cool because your employer, he's paying for your education. He wants you to get through there. And so there's a lot of opportunity here in Delaware for apprenticeship. All the employers are looking for people. So if you're looking for a career path, like Joe said, figure out what you like to do, register for classes, and we'll help you find a job in the industry. So registration process for the entire state. So Newcastle County, Kent County, and Sussex County, typically we start registration July 1st. Polytech and Kent County may start some waiting lists. We typically just open the gates July 1st. So you can call, you can email us. We have a website, and the seats go fast. So when you call, get registered, you have to pay a registration fee. And like I said, mine's $150, and I think, so are the other VOTEX. And
Yeah, they're just all about the same program.
yeah, we all try to keep our programs, very similar. And, like Joe said, it's very affordable. On this last slide here, Joe, is our, this is our websites. So if you go to these websites, you can email us questions. You can also call us. I had the phone numbers up on the other slide. We're on Google. We're on the web. Check us out. We all put out program brochures. Our brochures are online. Our brochures are found in, we put them in the Wawas. We put them in the rural farms. We put them everywhere we can. So if you see a program, if you have a question, feel free to email us, call us. And Joe did mention something really exciting. We are always looking for ways to expand apprenticeship into non-traditional trades. And we're also looking for ways to offer free apprenticeship training to students, especially first year students, or even students that are still in high school. So we're working on some programs. So please ask us, hey, is there free tuition available for me? It could be you live in a certain zip code that qualifies for free tuition. It could be because of your background. It could be because English is your second language. There's all these different programs that we try to match you to so that you get free training. And that's our goal. So I appreciate your time tonight. If you guys have any questions for me and Joe, we'd be glad to answer them for you.
Yes, we have a few questions. I think you answered one of them, which was, are you restricted to apprenticeships that are offered in the county you live in?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Nah, not at all. Not at all.
Okay. I have a question from a parent. They have an 11th grader. When is the best time to start this process?
There's
go ahead,
never a
Joe.
bad time to start.
Yeah, right.
If you're over 16 years of age, you can become a registered apprentice. So there are some rare students that go into the 12th grade and have a co-op and start earning on-the-job learning hours. And depending on what their situation is with the co-op, they come out, they go in, and boom, they fall right into trade school, and they're able to go as already an existing apprentice registered. And sometimes that works differently for hours, but regardless, I don't think there's a bad time to start looking at what you want to do, putting together your list of your call sheet, so to speak, of who you want to maybe explore as possible employers, and contacting guys like Mike or Jeremy or Mark and saying, hey, next year I'll be coming out and looking to get into trade school. And they can kind of give you a head start on the process there too.
Great. Another question from Tyler. He said that he read if you went to a VOTEC high school, you could get 1 year credit towards your hours once you become an apprentice.
Yeah, absolutely. So it depends on the program you take. So if you go to a VOTEC school and you take criminal justice, for example, I can't give you a year one, skip or pass, and you go to year two and plumbing. So as long as the coursework you took in high school is related to the coursework that you take in the secondary school for the adult education. So yeah, you do skip. So we communicate with the Department of Education. We get lists of students across the state that have taken, CTE, career and technical education, that offers advanced placement into apprenticeship training. So yeah, absolutely. So if you take electrical, say at Polytech, and you move down to the beach here in Sussex Tech, and you say, hey, Mike, I want to take electrical, I'll let you jump in right at year two. All I need is just, your shop certificate from your school. I'll honor it, and boom, you're right in. And that's where you get that, related training instruction before you can get that 8,000 hours on the job training, which is fine. You'll be making money either way, and you'll be working towards that goal, which is that journey person certificate at the end.
Let me add, and I'm gonna throw this question to Mike, but so that he can kind of address this. How long does that advanced placement last if I come out of high school with that certificate and I wait 3 years?
Yeah, good question. It only lasts 2 years. So you have a 2-year window. So you can't show up 5 years later and you try these other different jobs and say, hey, I want to skip year one. We'll have to start you all over again. So yeah, you have a 2-year window. 2-year window. Good point, Joe.
I thought that one was valid.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, great information. And one last question. Do you generally get a pension with a trade?
It depends on who you work for. Pensions are, they're situational. I'd say typically trades and unions go hand in hand. So if you're in a union, you're going to get a pension. If you're with a company, maybe a large company, they'll offer a pension. Small companies, they'll offer probably 401k. So I'd say pensions are something you would look into when you're applying for jobs.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be something where it varies heavily. But with today's, like I said, like Mike said, 401k options are usually out there for smaller companies. And if you get into a union apprenticeship, there's going to be benefits tied to that that would be separate than if you're into just an employee sponsor apprenticeship, because the unions will have a whole nother, set of benefits that they would offer you. But that's part of the employment side of it. It's not necessarily part of the tie-in to the education. So if that's a benefit to you and you can find that, great. If not, you would still be able to get a leg through the education process, and then down the road, you never know where it'll take you.
So I think those are all the questions that we had in the chat, but I have two questions, actually.
Sure.
So I hear you guys. Okay, there's another question, but I'm going to ask one of mine first. I hear you talk about the guys in the class and the guys in the class. What about women? Can you talk about?
Absolutely.
About-
So we really push for what we call non-traditional enrollment. So a non-traditional enrollment would be a male nurse or a female electrician, and there's actually funding out there that supports that. So we're always looking for ways to expand apprenticeship into to non-traditional genders. So there's money out there for that. There's developing programs for that. Right now, I have 4 females in my trades programs, which are typically male-dominated fields. We are looking into apprenticeable trades that are more female-dominated. So yeah, absolutely. We love the opportunity to expand apprenticeship in all directions.
Yeah, I'd like to add. I mean, and I heard a lot of guys here, guys there. The term "guys" gets thrown around a lot due to just maybe status quo, but there's 100% the same programs available, and we like to let people know that you would probably see more benefits. Like Mike was saying, there are programs out there, funding out there that may not be available to everyone based on the idea of diversifying and moving these programs in the direction of less traditional models. But the female or male involvement, we like to really try to push that you should not ever limit yourself. And I always like to tell a story about there was a female apprentice as a maintenance mechanic, facilities mechanic. And this female apprentice was, 5'8", blonde, female, getting into a field where she was going to be turning wrenches and doing stuff with a bunch of guys that are more traditionally in that trade, and was very successful, probably makes more.
Uh-oh.
Joe froze. I saw a question in there, Karen.
Yeah. Tilly, you want to raise that one question? We'll come back to Joe when he unfreezes.
Sure. How competitive are these apprenticeships, and are the students coming out of VOTEC high schools more likely to get those apprenticeships?
So as far as competitive, I would say really what apprentices compete for is space in the classroom. And it's a first come, first served basis. We don't bias in any direction. You register July 2nd. It's your seat. If classes start in September, you register September 10th. There's a chance that class could be full. So as far as competitiveness goes, it's equal across the board. It's first come, first served model. And as far as being competitive, as far as maybe job placement, the industry, every industry is looking for people, skilled work. So there is a how do they say, employees market. You pretty much can go to any employer. If you're qualified, they'll hire you. I mean, these employers are looking for people.
Joe, do you want to finish your story? Because you froze on us.
I know, I'm sorry, I apologize. Somebody somewhere was saying he's talking too much and cut me off. But no, I basically just want to make sure that there's no limitations on what could be done there in regards to the trades. And I think Mike would follow that up with the same kind of comments. So I see you took the question about competitiveness. We have a lot of trades right now with kind of being more more aware of some of the companies that are registering programs all the time, there are a lot of companies that will register programs with us and say, oh, we're looking for apprentices. We're looking for more. We need, we have a hard time finding qualified candidates. Qualified doesn't always mean a ton of experience. It means the right mindset, the right pre-exposure, knowing what you're getting into, and having maybe that initiative to jumping into a year one school. And so there are definitely companies out there looking, companies that are hungry. There are some major employers in Delaware that have programs that you'd be surprised. They're looking for that aging out workforce to be replaced, and they want to do it the right way. So, it's competitive, but really you're your own best advocate when looking for the opportunity for employment.
So I think, so we don't have any more questions in the chat, but I want to ask one more thing and then we can wrap up. So if for people who are interested, especially for students who are seniors this year, we heard, it sounded like there were a couple different next steps, whether they're going to contact the Department of Labor, whether they're going to call Mike or one of his peers at the other VOTEC schools in the other counties, whether they're reaching out to specific companies. So is that all correct? Like, is there one next best step, or there are several things that a student who wants to pursue this should or could do?
My advice would definitely be, if you feel like you aren't sure what your next step is, call the Department of Labor, or if it's not or you have to do one or the other, or call the school and talk to one of the people at the school. They'll both be able to give you information personalized to you. I would say, if it comes to regulations, policies, steps, things that have to be done, call the Department of Labor. We can answer questions about what you need to do, and then what might need to be done by an employer or sponsor that you might be eyeing up. And that's the one benefit that we have, is saying, once you might have said, okay, this is what I want to do, now I want to take that step into getting into it. If you call the Department of Labor and say, I'm really interested in becoming an apprentice in this field, and I don't have an employer, we're still going to put you into the right path to get into maybe the Blueprint project or something like that, where you'd be able to get a voucher for free education, or, in some regards, maybe help just find you the right course at the right school. But the first step is always going to be to reach out and get that information, either from myself, John, Dave, my peers, or Mike, Jeremy, or Mark at the schools. The one first step that I would say is definitively the same for everybody, is to be aware of what it is that you want career-wise, knowing what you want to get into, and then initiating that contact with somebody. You're still going to, at the end of the day, need to find a sponsor to become registered, or need to get a voucher or funding if you want to get a trade school without having to pay that tuition that year one. But any of those situations can be explained to you and kind of navigated for you through a contact at the Department of Labor. And I'm assuming, again, that Mike, Mark, or Jeremy at the schools would be more than happy to help navigate you in the right way.
Yeah, what we like to do is we like to lay out our programs and maybe have a student and family, parents tour the school, and then handle that kind of related training instruction side, the book instruction. And then once we start talking about getting a job or becoming registered, and then we like to do what we call a TO, or as a turnover. We like to get you over to Joe's team. So really that's the kind of like that hybrid model that we use, that best of both worlds. You've got me, I'm the school, I'm the book, I'm the instruction, I'm the classroom, and you got Joe, he's the employer, he's the process, he's the one that gets you registered and get you that free tuition. And we both work hand in hand, we'll both be working for you. So yeah, reach out to one of us, and if you reach out to me first, I'll get you to Joe. If you reach out to Joe, he'll eventually get you to me. So either way is a good first step. I think so.
Perfect. This was so informative. I learned a lot myself, and I'm hoping the students and parents or caregivers on the call did the same. So We will post this recording and the presentation on DelawareStudentSuccess.org. It's going to take us just a few days to do that, so it won't be tomorrow. But check back in, a couple days, maybe Friday, maybe Monday, and it'll be up there. And that way, you'll have the contact information. So there's a button on the homepage that says watch recorded webinars, and that's where you go to find the ones that we already had. So thanks both to Joe and to Mike for presenting tonight and sharing the information. And thanks to all of you for joining us and for attending. I hope it was helpful for you.
Thanks, everybody.
Planning. So thank you, everyone.
Yes,
See you, Joe.
thank you.
See you,
Thank you.
Karen.
Take care.
See you, Tilly.
Thank you.